The elevator doors slid open with a cold sigh, and William Carter stepped into the top floor of the Halberd Hotel, the place chosen for his late-night emergency business meeting. The hallway lights flickered as if afraid to stay awake. The carpet was so thick his shoes made no sound. A wall clock ticked hard like a heartbeat he could not control. On his phone, a message from Grace glowed bright. "Sir, please do not go in. I feel something is wrong." He exhaled, stubborn and tired. He had already dismissed her warning twice today. He touched the handle of the conference room. It was warm like a breath against his palm. He pushed. The room was dark except for a single lamp casting a yellow circle on the middle chair. The long glass table reflected the lamp like a still river at night. William took one step in. The door swung behind him and clicked shut on its own. Red dots, small, sharp, and deadly, danced over his jacket. A soft voice from the shadows said, "Welcome, Mr. Carter. We were waiting." William froze. His hand opened in the air as if it could hold the truth before it fell. Then he noticed the papers on the table, copies of his signature on a sale he never agreed to, and the shadow of a man he thought he could trust. William's mouth went dry. He whispered the first name that came to his mind, Grace. "Now let me tell you how we got here." Grace Miller was a poor maid with a careful smile and big steady eyes that always saw a little more than most people saw. She cleaned the quiet places, the spaces nobody thanked, like stair corners, pantry drawers, window grooves where dust keeps secrets. She lived in a tiny room above the garage in William's big home, a room where the ceiling hummed when the house generator coughed at night. Grace kept a jar with coins saved from tips and leftover grocery money. She called the jar Hope. On the jar she wrote with blue marker, "For Mom's little shop." Because even in hard times, Grace believed a seed can grow if you keep it warm. William was rich but not heavy with pride. He ran Carter Tech, a company that built smart sensors for farms and small factories, things that made the work of everyday people a little easier. He wore good suits, but he also rolled up his sleeves. He greeted his drivers by name. He asked the guards how their backs felt. He offered tea to the old gardener and paid for the plumber's daughter's braces when the man thought he would have to sell his car. If you work for a man like that, you do small things with big care. Grace wiped the edges of his teacup and straightened his files and made sure the kitchen had the ginger lemon he liked when his throat was rough from long speeches. He had once paid for Grace's mother to get a proper eye test and new glasses after Grace mentioned the woman was squinting to sew at night. He did not announce it. He just did it. When Grace got the message from the clinic, paid in full, she cried on the back steps, quiet tears like rain behind a closed window. People called William Sir because he earned it, not because he forced it. He had a partner named Daniel Hale who smiled with his lips but not with his eyes. The smile was like a thin cloth thrown over a chair with a broken leg. From far away it looked fine. Up close it wobbled. Grace noticed. She always noticed the small things. The world speaks in small things first, then in thunder later. It started on a Wednesday morning when a hawk circled the house 3 times. Maybe you don't trust signs. That's okay. Grace did not live by signs alone. She lived by sense, by pattern, by rhythm. But her grandmother, back when Grace was little, used to tell stories that walked like wisdom with a cane. When a bird that eats only brave things circles your roof, Grandma Ruth had said, look for the truth that is hiding behind polite doors. That morning, while Grace dusted the office shelf, she saw 3 fine scratches on William's briefcase lock, the kind you make when a wrong key tries to enter a right door. She also found a tiny camera lens near the library plant, hidden under a leaf like a shiny beetle. And when she carried William's tea to his study, she heard his phone buzz with a message from Daniel. Tonight. 9 p.m. Halberd. Bring the USB. Don't tell the team. It was not her place to read, so she did not. But the words fell out loud on the screen as he picked it up, and she could not unsee them. The air in the room tilted a little like a picture frame not hanging straight. At noon, the chef sent Grace to the market. She bought spinach, yams, peppers, and milk. The woman at the stall wrapped the milk in newspaper with a headline about mergers and hostile takeovers. The word hostile made Grace's stomach pinch. She hurried home, placed the milk in the fridge, then stood by the back door and breathed slow, as if her lungs were saving her from making a mistake. Should she speak? Should she wait? Some truths arrive like a knock. Some truths arrive like smoke slipping under a door. She chose to speak. Sir, she said softly when William came to the kitchen to grab a bottle of water. May I say something? Of course, Grace, he said, kind as always. I heard you have a night meeting, she said, keeping her eyes on the clean floor because courage sometimes looks down to gather its strength. Please, sir. I have a feeling. Do not go. Or if you must go, do not go alone. William smiled. He thought of her as a younger sister he should look out for, not someone who should look out for him. You worry too much, he said, tapping the cap of the water bottle against his palm, a habit he had when he was thinking. Daniel says it's urgent. We're sealing a deal. Nothing to fear. Grace swallowed. Sir, I saw a small camera in the library. And the briefcase lock has scratches. He cut in lightly, trying to calm her. Probably the security team testing something. I'll have them sweep the room again. Thank you for noticing. That's sharp of you, Grace. She took a breath. Sir, please. Don't go tonight. He laughed, not unkindly, but the way a person laughs when he wishes the world was as simple as your fear. If I refuse this meeting, he said, we could lose a contract that keeps 1,000 families fed. We make sensors farmers rely on. Sometimes the person in charge must be brave. He touched her shoulder, grateful. You're good to care. Grace nodded because she was taught to respect the decisions of those above her. But respect does not turn off worry. It only makes it quiet and strong. She went back to work. She wiped the kitchen counter until it shone like a mirror that could show the future if it wanted. She tucked the tiny camera in a sandwich bag and left it on the head of security's desk. She texted William once more in the early evening. Sir, forgive me, but please take 2 guards with you. Or share your live location with me. Please. He replied with a thumbs-up emoji and the words, I'll be fine. The day faded into a blue evening. Streetlights woke up one by one like children rubbing their eyes. William changed into a charcoal suit and a dark tie. He liked dark ties for serious deals. He slipped his USB drive into his inner pocket. He left his phone in his jacket and his faith in his partner. The driver took him to the Halberd Hotel and then waited downstairs with the engine on, the way drivers do when they think the important man will be back in 5 minutes. William strode through the lobby and stepped into that quiet elevator where the mirrors show you yourself and something just behind you that looks like your doubt. Upstairs, the hallway was long and hush. He read Grace's final text again outside the door. Do not go in. He almost smiled. Then he went in. The room was waiting like a mouth. The lamp was a single tooth. The red dots moved over his chest. The papers on the table were copies of everything he was sure he kept locked away. He saw his signature. He looked closer and saw it was not his handwriting. It was close but not true, like a song sung a half note wrong. A figure leaned into the lamp's light. It was Daniel Hale, his partner. Daniel's eyes were bright in a hungry way. He held a pen like a small dagger. I told you we should take a faster path, William, Daniel said, his voice smooth and dry. But you always had a heart that moved with the slow ones. Tonight we correct that. William felt heat at the back of his neck. What is this? He asked, although the room was already answering him with its cameras and its dots and its silence. This, Daniel said, spreading his hand, is your goodbye party. Smile for the security feed. William's jaw tightened. He thought of Grace in her careful eyes. He thought of the little camera she had found, of the scratched lock, of the hawk circling the roof. He did not believe in signs until signs started acting like facts. He slid his phone from his pocket, thumbed it awake under the table, and pressed share location to the contact he named home. The tiny blue dot left him and sped along the air toward Grace's old phone like a prayer with a map. Down at the house, Grace's phone buzzed on her nightstand. She wasn't sleeping. She was sitting on her small bed, hands wrapped around a warm mug of ginger tea, whispering, Please, God. Please. She looked at the screen and saw William's blue dot trembling on the top floor of the Halberd Hotel. She stood up so fast the tea sloshed on her hand. She hissed at the heat and grabbed a jacket. She ran for the stairs, then ran back to switch off the hot plate because even in fear, she did not waste light. She tried calling the driver. No answer. She tried the head of security. Line busy. She tried William. The call did not go through. So she did the brave thing that poor people do when nobody else will. She went herself. She ran past the garage and jumped into the gardener's little pickup. The gardener, Mr. Joe, was still trimming hedges under a lamp. Where are you going? He called. To bring our boss home, she said. Do you even drive? Only when I must. That sounds like now, he said, opening the gate for her. Grace drove like prayer looks when it is made of wheels. Her hands shook, but her eyes were steady. She knew the roads. She cut behind the market, past the old cotton factory, straight toward the hotel that rose like a dark ship out of the night. She parked crooked and did not care. She ran through the lobby in her house sneakers and simple jeans and the faded sweater that said sunshine, even though it was night. Upstairs, William kept his voice calm because leaders learn to keep their voices calm when their hearts are running. "You don't have to do this," he said to Daniel. "If you are short on money, we restructure. If you are under pressure, we call the board together. You started this company with me in a small room with 2 desks and a fan that squeaked. Don't let greed make you small." Daniel smiled again with his lips only. "Greed?" he said, almost offended. "I call it gravity. The world pulls everything toward power. You can stand still and be dragged, or you can push and look like you're flying." From the far corner, a man in a dark coat stepped forward. He was the kind of man who blends into crowded rooms and appears only in empty ones. He placed a folder on the table. Inside were bank transfers, fake authorizations, a schedule to move patents at midnight. The plan was built like a ladder leaning against someone else's house. Climb it careful enough and you might never be seen, unless a maid with careful eyes noticed the first rung. William's phone buzzed once in his pocket. He did not dare look. He said, "Steady, if you think I will sign, you do not know me." Daniel's eyes flashed. "We brought a pen," he said, tapping the paper. "We also brought better reasons than kindness." In that moment, the hallway outside filled with the soft thud of feet. Grace had made it. She was breathing hard, her chest lifting high, but her face was set like a small shield. She pressed her ear to the door and heard voices. She did not have a plan big enough for this room. She had only her will and the truth she felt in her bones. She tried the handle. It did not move. It was locked. She looked up and down the hallway and saw a fire alarm handle under a glass cover. The small red sign said, "Pull in case of fire." Fear can make fire in the wrong hands. Courage can use the same alarm to call help fast. Grace lifted her elbow to break the glass. Then she stopped. If she pulled it, the building would fill with people fast, but the men in the room might do something worse in the chaos. If she did nothing, William might sign away his soul. She closed her eyes for one heartbeat. When she opened them, her decision was clear. Inside the room, the man in the coat slid a fountain pen across the glass table toward William. "Last chance," he said. William stared at the pen. Then he slowly reached into his jacket and pulled out not a pen, but the small USB drive, the same one Daniel had demanded he bring. He held it where the lamp could see it. "Is this what you want?" he asked. Daniel's eyes sharpened. "Yes." "Then catch," William said, and he flicked the drive toward the far end of the room. It clinked against the wall and fell behind a chair. All the red dots jumped at once as if surprised. Daniel swore and motioned to a guard. In that split second, William moved. He swept the stack of forged papers off the table. The lamp rocked. The room's careful calm broke like a plate. And outside, Grace made her choice. She slammed her elbow into the glass, grabbed the handle and pulled the alarm. Sirens screamed through the hotel like angry birds. Lights strobed. Locks clicked open to allow evacuation. The conference room door released with a mechanical sigh. It swung an inch. Grace jammed her fingers into the gap, pulled with everything inside her and burst in. But before she could shout William's name, the power cut. The room went black. A heavy thump shook the floor. Someone yelled, "Get him." Boots rushed. A hand grabbed Grace's wrist in the dark. Another hand covered William's mouth. The smell of hot wires filled the air. Somewhere, glass shattered. A chair toppled. The hallway strobes turned the doorway into a blinking white wound in the night. And then, through the strobe, Grace saw them. 2 men in masks dragging William toward the service exit behind the panel wall. She threw herself forward, small and fierce, grabbing at William's sleeve with both hands. For one breath, she held him. For one breath, she felt the weight of a kind man and the pull of a cruel plan. The sleeve ripped. William vanished through the panel. The door slammed. Silence dropped, sharp and mean. "Where are they taking him?" Grace cried into the dark. No one answered. The sirens still screamed in the hotel corridors, their sharp cry bouncing off the marble walls. Guests ran in all directions, clutching handbags, shoes, even pillows pulled straight from their beds. But Grace stood frozen in the broken light doorway of that conference room, her chest tight, her hands trembling around the torn piece of William's sleeve she still held. It was the only proof that he had been there, and the only proof that he had been dragged away. "Sir Carter," she shouted, but her voice drowned in the alarms. The men in masks were gone, swallowed by the hidden service exit behind the panel wall. Grace pressed her palm against it, searching for a latch, a seam, anything that could let her through. Nothing. It was smooth as if the wall itself had eaten him. Her heart raced. She knew she had seconds before the hotel's emergency lights flickered back and security swarmed. But she also knew that if she stayed quiet, William might disappear forever. She ran into the hallway, bumping shoulders with a tall woman clutching her child. "Did you see men in masks?" Grace begged. The woman shook her head and hurried past, fear pressing her forward like a hand on her back. Grace dashed toward the stairwell. The smell of burnt wires lingered, mixed with the sweat of panicked guests. She shoved through the fire door and nearly collided with two men in hotel uniforms running upward. "You can't go this way, miss," one barked. "My boss was taken," Grace cried. "Men dragged him down here." The men exchanged a look. One frowned, the other narrowed his eyes. They were too calm, too controlled in the chaos. Something about their stiff shoulders made Grace's gut twist. She backed away slowly. "You," she whispered. The taller man smirked. "Wrong hallway, girl." Grace spun and bolted back through the door. Her sneakers slapped the floor hard as she ran down another corridor. Behind her, the two men's heavy footsteps followed. For the first time in her life, she wished she had wings. She darted into a laundry room, slammed the door and pressed her ear against it. The footsteps stopped outside. The knob rattled. She looked around frantically. White sheets hung from a rolling cart like ghostly curtains. She dove beneath them and held her breath. The door creaked open. Boots stepped in. "She went this way," one voice said. "No," the other replied. "If she saw too much, they'll handle her later. Forget the maid. Focus on Carter." Their boots retreated. The door clicked shut. Grace waited, her lungs burning, before crawling out. She dropped into a chair and pressed her shaking hands together. William was in danger because he trusted a man like Daniel. But Daniel was not the type to simply kidnap. He wanted something bigger, something permanent. And if Grace had learned anything in her 23 years of hard living, it was this. The smallest person in the room is often the only one who can slip through cracks others cannot see. She decided then she would not wait for police or for security or for anyone else. She would find William herself. The hotel was still a storm of alarms when she ran downstairs. She pulled her hood up to hide her face and slipped past the front desk. Outside, the night air was thick with the smell of petrol. Guests clustered on the sidewalks. Cars honked. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. Grace stopped, her eyes sweeping. And then she saw it. At the far end of the alley beside the hotel, a black van with tinted windows pulled away from the curb. Its engine roared low, predatory. Grace's chest leapt. She knew. She didn't need proof. That was William. Without thinking, she ran. She sprinted down the street, weaving between panicked guests, chasing the tail lights that burned like two red eyes. The van turned onto a dark road. Grace's sneakers slapped the pavement hard, her lungs screaming. A motorcycle zipped past. She waved frantically. "Please, help me. They've taken my boss." The rider slowed. A young man with braids under his helmet glanced at her. "What?" "No time." Grace cried. She pointed at the van. "Follow that van." The rider hesitated only a second. Something in Grace's wild eyes must have convinced him. He held out his hand. "Get on." Grace climbed onto the back, clutching his jacket. The bike roared to life, chasing the van through the night. Wind slapped her face, her hair whipped behind her, and her heart thundered. Every bump, every turn she thought she would fall. But she held on because she could not let William slip into the darkness. Up ahead, the van slowed near an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the docks. Its brake lights glowed, then vanished inside. The rider parked in the shadows. "This is crazy," he muttered. "You sure about this?" Grace slid off the bike. Her knees shook, but her voice was steel. "If I don't go in, he will die. I owe him my life. He's the only one who ever showed me kindness." The rider stared at her for a moment, then cursed under his breath. "Fine. But don't do anything stupid. I'll wait here. If you don't come back in 10 minutes, I'm calling the cops." Grace nodded. She pulled her sweater tighter and crept toward the warehouse. The rusty gates loomed tall. Inside, faint voices carried, a man laughing, another cursing, a muffled sound like someone gagged. Her heart squeezed. "William." She slipped in through a side door, the hinges squealing just enough to make her flinch. She crouched behind a stack of wooden crates. Through a gap, she saw them, 3 men in masks standing around William, who was tied to a chair. His face was bruised, his shirt ripped, but his eyes were alive. And Daniel was there too, smiling with cruel satisfaction. "Sign the transfer," Daniel sneered, shoving papers into William's lap. "Or you'll vanish tonight and no one will ever find you." William's voice was hoarse but firm. "I'd rather vanish than betray my people." Grace's nails dug into the wood. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run in. But she was just a maid in worn sneakers and a sweater, with nothing but courage in her chest. And then, one of the masked men turned his head. His gaze swept the room like a flashlight beam. Grace froze. His eyes narrowed. He started walking toward her hiding spot. Viewers, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city or country in the comments. The masked man's boots echoed against the warehouse floor, each step louder than the beat of Grace's trembling heart. She pressed her back hard against the crate, holding her breath so tight it felt like her chest would burst. His shadow stretched long across the wall, swallowing the dim light. He stopped right in front of her hiding place. Grace closed her eyes for a second, whispering in her heart, "Please don't let him find me." The man crouched, reaching to move the crate. Suddenly Daniel's sharp voice cut through the air. "Leave it. Focus on Carter. He's the prize, not some rat running around here." The man hesitated, grunted, and turned back toward William. Grace let out the smallest sigh of relief, but her body remained stiff, her muscles coiled like springs. From her hiding place she could see William tied to the chair, blood on his lip, his jaw set with courage. Daniel paced like a snake that believed it owned the cage. "You see, William," Daniel sneered, "you wasted years being kind, being generous. What has it bought you? A maid who begs you not to go to meetings, guards who fall asleep, and partners who plot against you. Kindness doesn't protect empires. Power does." William lifted his bruised face and looked at Daniel with calm fire. "Power without kindness is a curse. And curses always return to the one who speaks them." Daniel's smile flickered. His hand twitched, annoyed that William still had strength. He grabbed the papers again, slamming them onto William's lap. "Sign. Or they'll find your body floating by sunrise." Grace's breath caught. She knew William would never sign. But she also knew Daniel would keep his threat. Her mind raced. She had no weapon, no strength against 3 masked men and Daniel. Yet she remembered something her mother once told her when life was too heavy. "The brave don't always fight with fists, Grace. Sometimes they fight with cleverness, sometimes with speed, sometimes with nothing but their voice." Grace scanned the crates around her. One was marked with red paint, flammable. An idea sparked in her mind. If she could distract them, even for a moment, maybe William could fight, maybe she could untie him, maybe the motorbike rider outside could rush in. She picked up a small rock from the dusty floor. Her hands shook as she threw it across the room. It hit a metal drum with a loud clang. All 3 masked men spun instantly, weapons raised. "Who's there?" one barked. Daniel's eyes darted toward the shadows, suspicion sharp on his face. "Check it," he ordered. 2 of the men went to investigate. The third stayed near William, pressing a gun against his temple. Grace's stomach knotted, but she forced herself to stay still. William, seeing the chaos, whispered quickly, "Daniel, stop this madness before it consumes you. There is still time to turn back." But Daniel only laughed bitterly. "Turn back? To what? To being your shadow? No, William. Tonight I become the sun." As Daniel spoke, Grace crept out from behind the crates, her body moving low and quiet. She slipped toward William, her eyes never leaving the man with the gun. Every step felt like walking on the edge of fire. When she was just a few feet away, William's eyes widened slightly in shock as he saw her. He shook his head very subtly as if to warn her. But Grace shook hers back. She had come too far. She reached the back of the chair. With trembling fingers she began tugging at the rope binding his wrists. The coarse fiber scratched her skin, but she kept pulling. Her nails broke, her fingertips bled, but the knot started to loosen. And then, "Hui!" one of the masked men shouted from across the room. He had spotted movement, maybe just the tip of Grace's sweater. He ran forward, gun raised. Grace froze. William surged, twisting his wrist free from the half-loosened rope, and slammed his shoulder into the man still holding a gun to his head. The weapon went flying across the floor. The warehouse exploded into chaos. The other masked men rushed back. Daniel shouted, "Don't let him escape." Grace ducked as one man swung at her. She grabbed the only thing near her, a metal rod, and swung back with all her strength. It cracked against his arm and he howled in pain. William, now half free, kicked his chair backward, sending another man tumbling. But Daniel grabbed a crowbar from the floor, his face twisted with fury. "You should have stayed loyal, William," he screamed, raising the crowbar high. Grace's scream ripped through the air. "No." Daniel brought the crowbar down. And everything went black. The warehouse lights cut out, plunging the place into total darkness. Only the sound of grunts, shouts, and scrambling boots filled the air. Grace's hands groped blindly, searching for William, for safety, for anything. And then she felt it, a warm hand clutching hers in the dark. "Grace, run." William's voice hissed, hoarse but alive. But before they could move, a gunshot cracked through the night. The gunshot echoed like thunder inside the warehouse, bouncing off the steel walls. Grace's ears rang, her heart slammed against her ribs, and her breath caught in her throat. For a moment, everything froze. The darkness was complete, broken only by the faint glow of a security exit sign in the distance. "William," Grace whispered, her hands tightening around his. "I'm here," he whispered back, his voice low and urgent. But she could hear the pain in it. Boots shuffled in the dark. Someone groaned. Then Daniel's furious voice tore through the shadows. "Find them. Don't let them leave." Another masked man cursed. "Boss, he's bleeding." The shot grazed him. Grace's knees buckled at the word bleeding. She reached out blindly, her palm finding the wet warmth on William's side. "You're hurt," she whispered, her throat tight. "It's nothing," William said through clenched teeth. "We need to move." Chaos reigned in the pitch-black room. Men shouted, weapons clattered, crates toppled as they bumped into each other. In that confusion, William tugged Grace toward the faint red glow of the exit sign. Their feet splashed through puddles of oil, their steps uneven but desperate. Suddenly, a flashlight beam cut across the dark. Grace ducked, pulling William with her. The light swung wildly, hunting them like prey. "There!" a masked man shouted. Another gunshot cracked. Splinters burst from the wooden crate just inches from Grace's head. She gasped but kept moving, her grip on William iron tight. They stumbled into a narrow passage leading to the back of the warehouse. The smell of sea salt hit Grace's nose. She realized with dread that the exit led straight to the docks, nowhere to hide but water and ships. Behind them, Daniel's voice grew closer. "Don't let him out. He won't escape me." Grace and William burst through the exit door into the open night. The cold wind slapped her face, whipping her hair across her eyes. The moon hung low, silver on the restless water. Docked ships rocked gently, their ropes creaking. The place was deserted except for the van parked nearby, the same one that had brought William here. But the van wasn't empty. The driver sat behind the wheel, engine running as if ready for the next move. His eyes widened when he saw William stumble out with Grace. "Go back inside," the driver shouted, reaching for something under his seat. Before Grace could react, William grabbed her hand and dragged her toward a stack of shipping containers. They ducked behind one just as another gunshot ripped through the night. The bullet sparked against the steel. Grace pressed her back against the cold metal, her chest heaving. "Sir, they won't stop. What do we do?" William's face was pale, sweat shining on his forehead. He pressed his hand against his bleeding side, his breath shallow. But his eyes still burned with fire. "We fight smart," he said. "And we survive. Together." Grace bit her lip. She was just a maid in worn sneakers and a faded sweater. She had no training, no weapons, no plan. Yet here she was, facing guns and betrayal beside the only man who had ever treated her with dignity. She swallowed her fear and nodded. "Then we fight." The warehouse door slammed open again. Daniel emerged, crowbar in one hand, a pistol in the other. The masked men fanned out behind him, their flashlights slicing through the shadows. "William." Daniel's voice boomed across the docks. "This is your last chance. Sign the papers, or both you and your little maid will disappear tonight." Grace's stomach twisted, but she forced her chin up. The word "maid" stung, but she wouldn't let Daniel break her spirit. She glanced at William. His jaw clenched, his hand trembling on his side, but his voice was steady. "Daniel," he called out, "you've already lost. Because when this night ends, everyone will know who you truly are." Daniel laughed, bitter and sharp. "They'll know nothing if you're at the bottom of the ocean." He lifted his pistol. Grace's eyes darted around desperately. And then she saw it, a thick, heavy chain tied to a crane that hung over a stack of cargo. If she could release it, the load might fall, creating enough chaos for them to run. Her heart pounded. She touched William's arm. "Stay here," she whispered. He grabbed her wrist. "Grace, no." But she shook free and crawled low toward the crane, the gravel biting her knees. Every second felt like an hour, every breath like her last. Behind her, Daniel and his men advanced, their flashlights swinging closer. Grace reached the chain. Her hands fumbled, fingers raw, tugging at the rusted hook. It wouldn't budge. She pulled harder, her teeth clenched, whispering, "Please, please, please." And then snap. The hook gave way. The chain rattled like thunder. A massive crate suspended above came crashing down with a deafening boom, exploding splinters and dust everywhere. Daniel and his men screamed, diving for cover. The dock shook beneath the impact. Grace didn't wait. She sprinted back to William, grabbed his arm and pulled with all her strength. Now, run. They dashed along the docks, the night wind tearing at their clothes. For a moment, hope lit Grace's chest like fire. But then headlights flared. Another van screeched into view, blocking their path. 4 more men jumped out, armed and ready. William stopped, his breath ragged, his blood dripping. Grace froze beside him, her courage shaking but still alive. They were trapped between 2 groups of enemies with nowhere left to run. And then Daniel's voice rang out behind them, furious but triumphant. It's over, William. You should have listened. You never should have trusted a maid. Viewers, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city or country in the comments. The docks were silent except for the groan of ropes and the slap of waves against the wooden posts. William and Grace stood frozen between 2 vans, their shadows stretched long in the headlights. Daniel stepped forward, crowbar in one hand, pistol in the other, his grin sharp like broken glass. You see? Daniel sneered, his eyes glittering with triumph. Kindness makes you weak. Loyalty makes you blind. And tonight, both will bury you. William's chest rose and fell heavily, blood still seeping from his side. Grace stood beside him, her fists clenched though she had no weapon. Fear tightened her throat, but something hotter burned beneath it, defiance. Daniel, she shouted, surprising even herself with the strength of her voice. You're wrong. Kindness is not weakness. It's strength. And tonight, it will be your downfall. Daniel laughed, shaking his head. Listen to her, William. Your little maid thinks she can lecture me. Tell me, Grace, what can you do with your empty hands? You are nothing. Grace swallowed, but she didn't look away. Maybe I'm nothing to you, but I'm everything to the man you're trying to destroy. And that's enough. William glanced at her, his eyes soft despite the pain. Her courage gave him strength. He straightened as much as he could, his voice steady. Daniel, even if you kill me, you'll never erase the truth. The world will know who betrayed me. Who betrayed all of us. Daniel's smirk faded. His finger tightened on the trigger. Then let the world know. Suddenly, a roar of engines cut through the night. Headlights appeared at the far end of the docks. 3 motorcycles sped in, tires screeching against the concrete. At the front was the young rider with braids, the one who had given Grace a lift. Behind him were 2 others, their headlights blazing like angry eyes. Daniel cursed. What is this? The bikers swerved, their engines howling, and skidded to a stop between William and Grace and the armed men. The leader pointed at Grace. Get on. Grace didn't think twice. She pulled William's arm, half dragging him toward the bikes. But William stumbled, his injury slowing him down. One of the bikers jumped off, slinging William's arm over his shoulder. We've got him, move. Daniel shouted, don't let them escape. Shoot them. Gunfire erupted, loud and merciless. Bullets sparked off steel containers, splintered wood, and sent shards flying. Grace ducked, covering her head, but the bikers revved their engines, weaving wildly to block the shooter's aim. One biker kicked over a fuel canister, gasoline spilling across the dock. Another tossed a burning rag onto it. Flames erupted, roaring upward, forcing Daniel's men to scatter. The night lit up with fire, the heat fierce against Grace's skin. Now, the leader shouted. Grace and William climbed onto the nearest bike. The rider gunned the engine, the machine trembling beneath them. Grace wrapped her arms around William, holding him tight as the bike shot forward, weaving between flames and gunshots. Behind them, Daniel screamed in fury. You won't escape me, William. This isn't over. His voice carried through the chaos like a curse. The bikes tore down the dock, engines howling against the night. Wind whipped Grace's hair, her arms locked around William as if she could hold him to life itself. The city lights glimmered ahead like a promise. For the first time that night she felt a spark of hope. But hope is fragile. As they neared the city streets, a black SUV roared out of nowhere, swerving across their path. The bikers tried to turn, but the SUV's headlights blinded them. Tires screeched. The bike carrying Grace and William lost balance. It skidded sideways, sparks flying, and they crashed onto the rough concrete. Grace rolled across the ground, pain tearing through her body. Her ears rang, her vision blurred. She coughed, pushing herself up, her palms bleeding. Beside her, William lay still, blood pooling beneath him. No, no, no. Grace scrambled to his side, shaking his shoulder. Sir, stay with me. Please, don't leave me. But William's eyes fluttered, his lips pale. His voice was barely a whisper. Grace, if I don't make it, remember, kindness always wins. Then his head slumped to the side. And from the SUV, Daniel stepped out slowly, a devil's smile spreading across his face. Run if you want, Grace. But tonight, I finish what I started. Viewers, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city or country in the comments. The night was still alive with the crackle of flames back at the docks, but here on the concrete road, everything felt too quiet. Grace knelt beside William, shaking him with trembling hands. His eyes were half closed, his breathing shallow. The sound of it cut her deeper than any blade ever could. Daniel's footsteps crunched closer, slow and cruel, the pistol dangling casually in his hand as though he already owned the moment. His shadow stretched across William's body and swallowed Grace in its length. Move away, girl, Daniel said, his voice smooth like oil sliding across water. He's done. Don't waste your tears on a man who was too blind to see that I was always better. Grace looked up at him, her cheeks streaked with dirt and tears, her hair wild from the fall. Better? She spat, her voice shaking but fierce. You're nothing but a coward who hides behind guns and masks. You'll never be half the man he is. Daniel's smile faltered, replaced by a flash of rage. He raised the pistol and pointed it at William's head. Say goodbye. Grace didn't think. She hurled herself across William's body, spreading her arms wide as a shield. You'll have to shoot me first. Daniel chuckled, the sound empty. Don't tempt me. His finger squeezed the trigger. Before the shot could fire, the roar of engines returned. The motorcycles. The bikers hadn't fled, they had circled back. Headlights flooded the street, bright and blinding. Tires screeched as the bike skidded to a stop around them. The young rider with braids jumped off, wielding a heavy chain in his hands. Back away from them, he shouted. Daniel snarled, firing a shot toward the bikers. The bullet sparked off the pavement. The bikers ducked, then charged. One swung a pipe, another tossed a bottle that shattered near Daniel's feet, flames licking up where the gasoline trail still clung. Daniel cursed and stumbled back toward the SUV. You'll regret this, he barked. All of you. He jumped into the vehicle, slamming the door. The tires screamed as the SUV sped off into the night, vanishing into the distance. For a moment, silence fell. The only sound was William's labored breathing. Grace collapsed beside him, tears streaming. Please, she whispered, clutching his hand. Don't leave me. You've always been kind, you can't stop now. The young biker crouched beside them. We need to get him to a hospital, fast. Grace nodded, wiping her face. With the help of the bikers, they lifted William carefully onto the back of the largest bike. Grace climbed up behind him, cradling him against her chest to keep him steady. Her sweater soaked with his blood, but she didn't care. Hold on, the biker said grimly, revving the engine. This ride decides everything. The bikes tore through the city, racing against time. Wind whipped Grace's face, but all she could hear was William's faint breath in her ear. She whispered over and over like a prayer, Stay with me, sir. Stay with me. Neon lights blurred as they passed. The hospital sign glowed ahead, red against the night. The bikes skidded to a halt at the emergency entrance. Nurses and doctors rushed out with a stretcher. Grace held onto William's hand until they pried him away and rolled him inside. She tried to follow, but a nurse blocked her. You can't come in. Wait here. Grace stood in the harsh hospital light, her hands shaking, William's blood drying on her clothes. The bikers hovered nearby, watching her silently, their faces grim. Minutes felt like hours. Each tick of the clock was a hammer against her chest. Her mind spun with images. William's smile when he had once thanked her for a simple cup of tea, his kindness when he paid for her mother's glasses, his steady voice when he told her kindness wasn't weakness. And then the doors burst open. Doctors rushed past with a defibrillator. A nurse shouted, He's crashing. Grace's knees gave way. She dropped into the plastic hospital chair, her palms pressed together, whispering through tears, Please don't take him. Please. From the hallway, the flat, cold beep of a heart monitor echoed. Viewers, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city or country in the comments. The long hallway of the hospital stretched before Grace like a tunnel with no end. The sharp smell of disinfectant stung her nose, and every echo of hurried footsteps felt like thunder in her chest. She sat on the hard plastic chair, her sweater stiff with William's dried blood, her palms clasped so tight they hurt. Inside the emergency room, voices rose and fell like waves. Clear! A doctor shouted, and the sound of the defibrillator cracked against the silence. Grace flinched with each jolt, as if her own heart was being shocked. The flat beep of the monitor haunted her ears. Then, suddenly, the steady beep-beep-beep of a heartbeat returned. Relief flooded her body like rain after a long drought. Tears spilled freely as she whispered, "Thank you, oh thank you." The nurse who had blocked her earlier stepped out, her face lined with exhaustion but also calm. "He's stable for now. The bullet only grazed his side, but the blood loss was dangerous. He'll need rest and we'll keep him under observation." Grace leapt up. "Can I see him?" The nurse hesitated then nodded. "Only for a moment." Grace pushed through the swinging doors and entered the room. William lay pale against the white sheets, an oxygen mask on his face, wires snaking from his chest to the machines. His eyes fluttered open when he heard her footsteps. "Grace?" His voice was hoarse but there was a small smile tugging at his lips. She rushed to his side, gripping his hand gently. "You scared me, sir. I thought I lost you." "You didn't," he whispered. "You saved me." Grace shook her head, her tears dripping onto his hand. "No, sir. I tried but I'm just a maid. I couldn't fight them. I couldn't." William squeezed her fingers weakly. "Don't you ever call yourself just a maid. Tonight you were braver than men with guns. You warned me. You risked your life. Without you I would be gone. Grace, you are far more than you think you are." Her chest tightened with emotion. Nobody had ever spoken to her like that, not her family, not anyone. She nodded through her tears. "Rest now. Please. I'll stay here. I won't leave." For a while peace filled the room. The machines hummed, his breathing steadied, and Grace sat quietly, her hand never leaving his. But peace doesn't last long when enemies still breathe. At the far end of the hospital, the automatic doors slid open. Daniel strode in, his face hidden beneath a baseball cap, his jacket zipped up. He walked with false calm, carrying a briefcase. To anyone else he looked like a late-night visitor. But his eyes burned with unfinished business. The receptionist greeted him. "Good evening, sir. Can I help you?" Daniel smiled coldly. "Visiting my brother." He flashed a fake ID, the kind money can buy. The receptionist nodded and waved him through. Daniel's steps echoed as he moved down the hall. His mind was set, his anger boiling. He had lost William once tonight. He would not lose this chance again. Back in the room, Grace rested her head against William's hand, whispering prayers under her breath. She didn't notice the shadow creeping under the door. Then came a faint creak, the door easing open. Grace lifted her head just in time to see Daniel step inside, his eyes locked on William's fragile body. In his hand was a syringe filled with clear liquid. Poison. Silent, deadly, final. Her heart dropped. Daniel's whisper cut the air. "Goodbye, old friend." Grace shot to her feet. "No!" she screamed, throwing herself between Daniel and the bed. The syringe glinted under the hospital light. Viewers, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city or country in the comments. Grace's scream pierced the sterile silence of the hospital room, echoing down the white corridors. Daniel froze for only a second, his eyes narrowing with rage as he gripped the syringe tighter. "Move, Grace," he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "This doesn't concern you." Her legs trembled, but she spread her arms wide, blocking William's bed with her small frame. "It does concern me. You'll have to go through me first." Daniel smirked. "Don't be foolish. You're a maid. Disposable. No one will care if you vanish." Grace's voice shook, but her eyes blazed with fire. "Maybe I am just a maid to you. But to him I am someone. And tonight that's enough." William stirred weakly on the bed, his voice hoarse but determined. "Daniel, stop, it's not too late." Daniel's jaw tightened. "It is too late." He lunged forward, thrusting the syringe toward William. Grace reacted without thinking. She grabbed a metal tray from the bedside table and swung it hard. The tray slammed into Daniel's arm, knocking the syringe across the floor. It rolled under the bed, clattering loudly. Daniel roared with fury. He slapped the tray from her hands, sending it crashing against the wall. His eyes burned with hatred. "You'll regret that." Before he could strike her, the door burst open. The young biker with braids and 2 police officers stormed in. The biker pointed at Daniel. "That's him. That's the man who tried to kill Mr. Carter at the docks." The officers drew their guns. "Drop to the ground now?" Daniel's face twisted in panic. He glanced at the window, calculating his escape. Without warning, he shoved Grace aside and bolted. The officers lunged, but he slipped through their grasp and sprinted down the corridor. Grace scrambled to her feet. "Don't let him get away." The biker chased after the officers, their footsteps pounding through the hospital. Alarms blared as security joined the pursuit. Grace turned back to William, her chest heaving. He was pale but alive, his eyes fixed on her with something like pride. "Grace, you stopped him." Tears filled her eyes. She held his hand tightly. "I'll always protect you, sir. Just like you protected me when you showed me kindness." From down the hall, shouts erupted. A gunshot cracked, sharp and terrifying. Grace's heart leapt into her throat. She didn't know if Daniel had been caught, or if he had escaped again. The door slammed open once more. The biker stumbled back in, sweat glistening on his brow. His face was grim. "He got away." Grace's stomach dropped. "What? No, he can't." The biker nodded, his voice low. "He ran into the night. But he's wounded. He won't get far." William closed his eyes, his breathing shallow. "Grace, it's not over. He'll come again." Grace clutched his hand tighter, her jaw set. "Then let him come. Next time he'll find we're ready." But deep inside, fear gnawed at her. Daniel was still out there, and his hatred was darker than ever. And somewhere in the city night, Daniel limped into the shadows, clutching his bleeding arm, his mind burning with vengeance. His whisper carried into the dark. "If kindness is your weapon, William, then I'll make sure it destroys you." Viewers, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city or country in the comments. The hospital lights glowed soft and sterile, but to Grace it felt like a fragile shield against the storm that still raged outside. She sat by William's bed, exhaustion heavy in her bones, yet her eyes never left his face. His breathing was steadier now, his wound cleaned and stitched, but his weakness haunted her. The biker with braids leaned against the wall, arms crossed. His name, she had learned, was Marcus. He had risked everything to help them, and now his sharp eyes scanned the hall like a hawk. "That man Daniel, he won't stop," Marcus said. "He's too invested. Too angry." Grace nodded, her fingers wrapped around William's hand. "I know. He's like fire. But even fire burns out." Marcus shook his head. "Not if he finds more fuel." As if to prove his words, the night outside was restless. The city streets near the hospital glimmered with police lights. Officers combed alleys, helicopters swept the skies, but Daniel remained a shadow slipping through cracks. Grace felt his presence like a weight pressing on her chest. Hours passed. William drifted in and out of sleep, his lips moving as though whispering to memories. Grace dabbed his forehead with a damp cloth, humming softly to calm him. She remembered how, years ago, her mother would sing when fear filled their tiny home. Songs didn't stop the storms, but they made the storms easier to bear. Just when the quiet started to settle, a loud boom shook the hospital walls. Grace leapt to her feet. Alarms wailed instantly, red lights flashing. Smoke curled into the hallway. Patients screamed in fear. Marcus pulled open the door and cursed. Explosion. Ground floor. Grace's blood went cold. Her first thought was of Daniel. "It's him," she whispered. "He's here." Marcus grabbed her arm. "We have to move Carter out now. If he set that blast, he'll be coming straight for this floor." Two nurses rushed in with a stretcher. "We need to evacuate him," one shouted. Together, they lifted William carefully, attaching his 4 lines to portable stands. Grace walked beside them, gripping his hand as if letting go would mean losing him forever. The hallway was chaos, smoke, shouting, flashing lights. People ran in every direction. The elevator was dead, so they turned to the stairwell. Marcus led the way, his chain wrapped around his fist, ready for anything. They made it halfway down before a figure appeared in the haze below. Grace froze when she recognized the gait, the cruel tilt of the head. Daniel. His jacket was torn, soot smearing his face, but his eyes gleamed with that same deadly hunger. "Running won't save you," he snarled, his voice echoing in the stairwell. "Tonight ends with me." The nurses gasped. One nearly dropped the stretcher. Marcus stepped forward, his chain swinging. "Over my dead body." Daniel pulled a pistol from his belt. The gleam of it was sharp, merciless. "That can be arranged." Grace's heart pounded. They were trapped on the stairs, smoke thickening around them, William weak and helpless. The nurses trembled, Marcus tightened his grip, and Daniel raised the gun. Grace looked at the fire alarm on the stairwell wall, then at the sprinkler system overhead. Her mind raced. She had one chance. She grabbed a fallen metal crutch from the floor, her hands shaking, and hurled it at the alarm box. The glass shattered. Instantly, icy water burst from the sprinklers above, drenching the stairwell. Smoke hissed as it met the spray. The sudden flood of water blinded Daniel for a split second. "Now!" Grace shouted. Marcus charged, swinging his chain with a fierce crack. It wrapped around Daniel's wrist, the gun clattering down the stairs. Daniel roared, trying to yank free. The nurses pushed the stretcher upward. Grace helping them lift William to the next landing. But Daniel was strong, his fury like iron. He ripped the chain loose and slammed Marcus against the wall. With a snarl, he lunged up the stairs toward Grace in the stretcher. Grace spun, her wet hair plastered to her cheeks, her chest heaving. Her eyes met Daniel's, and for the first time she saw not just greed but pure hatred. He reached out, his hand clawing toward William's stretcher. Grace threw herself in front of him, screaming, "You'll never have him." And Daniel's hand closed around her throat. Viewers, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city or country in the comments. Daniel's grip tightened around Grace's throat, his fingers pressing like iron bars. Her lungs screamed for air, her vision blurred, and her knees buckled. The roar of sprinklers above and the chaos in the stairwell faded into a dull ringing. "You should have stayed in your place," Daniel growled, spittle flying from his mouth. "A maid should know when to bow and when to disappear." Grace clawed at his hand, fighting for breath. Her heart pounded, but even as her strength ebbed, her spirit refused to break. She forced her eyes open, locking them on his. In that gaze burned something Daniel could never understand: courage born from kindness, strength born from sacrifice. Behind her, William stirred on the stretcher. His voice, though weak, cut through the storm like a spark in darkness. "Daniel, let her go." Daniel sneered. "Or what? You'll bleed to death watching me?" But Marcus, bloodied and bruised from being slammed into the wall, staggered back to his feet. His chain still dangled from his hand, slick with water. His eyes hardened with resolve. "Not if I end this first." With a roar, Marcus swung the chain. It cracked across Daniel's arm, forcing him to release Grace. She collapsed to her knees, coughing violently, precious air flooding her chest again. Daniel snarled and lunged at Marcus, fists flying. The two men grappled in the stairwell, slipping on wet concrete, their grunts echoing. Marcus slammed Daniel against the railing, but Daniel drove his elbow into Marcus's ribs, forcing him back. Grace, still gasping, forced herself upright. Her eyes darted to the pistol that had clattered down a few steps earlier. Every muscle screamed, but she staggered toward it. Her fingers closed around the cold steel. "Grace!" William's voice rasped, urging her on. Daniel noticed. His eyes widened with fury. "No!" He shoved Marcus aside and charged toward her, water splashing beneath his boots. Grace raised the gun, her arms trembling. Daniel loomed closer, his face twisted, his voice a growl. "You won't pull that trigger. You don't have the courage." But Grace's voice, though raw, rang steady. "Courage doesn't always need weapons. But tonight it does." Daniel lunged. The gunshot cracked like thunder. Daniel staggered, his eyes wide in disbelief. He clutched his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers, and collapsed against the railing. With a scream of rage and pain, he tumbled down the stairwell, his body crashing against the steps until he lay crumpled at the bottom, unmoving. The stairwell fell silent except for the hiss of sprinklers and Grace's ragged breathing. She lowered the pistol slowly, her hands shaking, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. Marcus rushed to her side, steadying her. "You did it. You saved him." Grace dropped the gun, her knees giving out as she sank beside William's stretcher. He reached for her hand with weak but steady fingers. "Grace," he whispered, pride in his tired eyes, "you were braver than all of us. You saved my life, again." Her lips trembled. "No, sir. You saved mine first, with your kindness. I only returned it." The nurses hurried them up the stairs, away from the smoke and ruin, toward the waiting safety of police reinforcements. Outside, the flashing lights of patrol cars painted the night red and blue. Officers rushed in, securing the scene. Paramedics pulled William's stretcher into an ambulance. Grace climbed in beside him, refusing to let go of his hand. As the doors closed and the sirens wailed, she looked at him, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside. "Kindness isn't weakness, sir. It's the only strength that lasts." William smiled faintly, his eyes fluttering shut, not in defeat but in peace. The ambulance sped into the night, carrying them both away from the fire, away from the betrayal, and toward a future none of them could yet see. And at the ruined stairwell, police found Daniel's body, broken but still alive, groaning as they hauled him into custody. His reign of greed and vengeance was over. Grace leaned her head against William's arm inside the ambulance, whispering softly, "You'll be safe now. I promise." Because sometimes the poorest maid can carry the richest courage. Viewers, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city or country in the comments so I can greet you personally after this incredible journey.